El próximo ponente es Alfonso Pérez Rodríguez, del Centro Oceanográfico de Cádiz, del Instituto Español de Oceanografía, que nos va a presentar su comunicación sobre evaluación de estrategias de gestión para un stock de vida corta utilizando FLBEIA, el caso del boquerón del Golfo de Cádiz.
Hi, hello, good evening. Well, thanks for the opportunity to present this study that I have been working on during some time within the project Math for Fish, and with a group of colleagues from the Oceanographic Center here in Cádiz, but also some colleagues from ASTI in Portugal, Laura Weiss, thanks for your help, and also some colleagues from ASTI, Andrés Uriarte, but also Sonia Sanchez. This work is about assessing different alternative harvest control rules for short living stocks using an MSC framework that is FLBEIA, and this is the case study for the Gulf of Cádiz, the anchovy in the Gulf of Cádiz. This, the anchovy in the Gulf of Cádiz is the component of a bigger stock, the 27.9A anchovy that is all over here, the Iberian waters. But it is divided in two components, the west and the south. I'm going to present about the south, the Gulf of Cádiz here in. And well, we provide catch advice separately for each component, and then they are later on considered together, but that's a different story. And the management is an in-year management calendar with from the 1st July to the 30th of June, the year after. Well, this is a short-living species, like all the anchovy stocks, and that's very important for what I will present here, because once they born, they grow really fast, they mature very early, they have a very high natural mortality and very high, it seems, high senescent mortality. So even without fishing, they very rarely get above age 3. They are mostly age 0, 1, some 2, but no, not all the fishes. So typical short-living species. The fishing catches is being mostly in the southern component, and since 2014, also the western component took a big portion. That's interesting, also in relation to what Andrés mentioned before about the Bay of Biscay anchovy. And in the southern component, most of the catches are coming from the Spanish Purse Seine, and mostly at ages 0 and mostly at age 1, especially talking about biomass. Well, as Maria Jose already introduced, the advice was provided, it's better to say, until very recently with the 1/2 rule. That is one of the two rules that for short-living species are advised within the Category 3 framework in ICES, and this harvest control rule, already Maria Jose explained it very well. I just will say that this is a biomass index that usually no, it is a relative index that usually is coming from survey indices, but in this case, what we are using there, it is not a survey, a scientific survey information, but it is a gadget assessment model that was approved in 2018, but it was approved as a relative biomass in time series or index, not as an absolute value, and that's something important. We will talk about it a bit later. So that in that harvest control rule, we have a biomass safeguard with a biomass limit or trigger point that is estimated in this way, taking into account the information from the historical period, and it has also 80% symmetrical uncertainty cap. So the problem, as Maria Jose said, is that the dynamic of these short-living, fast-growing, and early dying stocks is that with this harvest control rule, we cannot track well what is going on. We are taking information from maybe not so relevant period, and then maybe we need to check, and this is what we did, some other harvest control rules that were already explored before in a study from colleagues from ASTI, and it seems it is a better option for this type of stocks. So this harvest control rule, basically you have the catch advice for the next year will be based in your estimate of biomass, and this needs to be absolute, of course. And then a harvest rate that once you find the best one, this is a proxy for the MSY, and also you will have a biomass safe word that again you will base that in your estimate of biomass in relation to a reference point, limit reference point. So our goal is identifying which options for these constant harvest rate rules are better for what harvest rates could be MSY proxy, and compare the performance of those rules with the 1/2 rules. For that, we use an MSC framework that is the FLBEIA, Bioeconomic Impact Assessment in FLR. It is integrated within the FLR packages, and it is formed by typical components in an MSC framework with the operating model, where we simulate the dynamic of the fish stocks, the fleets, and their interactions. We don't have covariates in here. And the management procedure, where we will simulate the assessment, the implementation of the harvest control rules, and the simulation of providing advice. Observation model and implementation model connects both, providing the data with error, or and the implementation model with some specific changes over the advice catch. So the first step is conditioning the operating model in the historic period. So for that, and later on, Laura Weiss will present an MSC study also for the Western component, and here is a big difference between the two studies, so I think it's interesting to see both examples today. In our case, we use the gadget assessment model. Here, the gadget assessment model, and then we use it to condition during the historic period, from 1989 to 2021. We set 1,000 iterations, that is 1,000 populations in the operating model of the FLBEIA that you will simulate during the historic period and get them ready to start the projection period, and then extracting uncertainty estimates from there. The problem is, well, we simulate the dynamic by semester because, as I said, the management calendar is from half year to half the next year, so we can simulate the assessment there. And the thing is that gadget is deterministic, so we don't have uncertainty in the stock estimates during the historic period, and we don't have variability in the biological and fishing-related processes. So then the solution we used is the one proposed by Pamela Woods and Bjarke Elvarsson and other colleagues from Iceland, that what they did was a parametric bootstrap resampling of the assessment model residuals, and then we generate a number of new sets of input data by resampling those residuals, and then we refeed the gadget assessment model to those new 100 sets of data and produce new 100 different outputs that we can use to populate those 1,000 iterations, 10 iterations per model, and then we can generate uncertainty or variability in our estimates from the model for the historic period, and especially important, the last year of the historic period, so we can start assessing the uncertainty in the projection, the first years. We did only 100 because it is hard to fit, and then it takes very long, so we consider it could be enough to have variability. So with that, we can already populate the operating model. The fish stocks, age structure, 0 to 3, numbers at age, mean weight at age, and natural mortality taken from those 100 refit models. Well, we assume that they are fully mature at age 1, and the fleets, as I showed, we can keep it simple, one single fleet, one single métier, because most catches are coming from the Spanish Pulsein fleet. And then the catches, we assume them perfect, taken from officially reported catches, fishing effort taken from the report from WG Hansa. This is the working group within ICES where the assessment for this stock is conducted. And then the fleet catchability at age is estimating with each of the 1,000 iterations with the information we are providing in there. So next, we set the conditions for the projection by taking basically the average value of the last 3 years for all these biological processes. Recruitment is simulated annually and independently for each iteration. We fit a hockey stick stock recruitment relation for each iteration independently. And then we simulate the process, annual random process with low normal distribution. The catchability at age, we take the average of the last 3 years. These are kind of standard, simple approaches. For the observation model, we assume perfect observation. The reason is because here in the management procedure, we are not simulating the assessment model. We are not running the assessment model. We are simulating the assessment in an assessment model emulator. So it is a shortcut MSc approach with the goods and the bads. And so we need to estimate the assessment error that we will apply every year at the start of the second semester to the information coming from the operating model. And in that, for that we use the historic retrospective pattern. We have assessment from 2018 to 2022. We assume that in 2022, the estimate from there is the closer to the real stock status, and from there we estimate the error, mean, variance, and covariance between consecutive years, because we need to simulate that. So then we can implement this error especially for the 1/2 rule. It's important to have the covariance. And then the harvest control rules that I already presented, the 1/2 and the constant harvest rates. We will test many different values for the harvest rate and implement with or without this biomass safeguard. The performance statistics we measure is the typical ones, at least to start with, is risk at 3, to see what is the percentage, the risk of being below billing with our limit set as 5%, and the annual yield, the median of the mean catch over time. These metrics were estimated in 3 time periods: short, mid, and long. Short, the first 5 years of the projection; mid, the next 5, and long, the last 10 years of the projection period that I didn't mention, but it is from 2022 to 2050, the projection. So we started with a base case that I already introduced in there, and then we tested a number of sensitivity analysis, testing different options for some elements like limited maximum recruitment or not. If we introduce some extreme assessment errors that could happen, we observed that in the past. And we explore also the effect of that issue with the catchability in the gadget assessment model. That is what is the reason to take the gadget as a relative term and not as an absolute in that benchmark in 2018. So I have not much time, but basically this is the final setup for the MSc that we decided. And in there, we used the gadget assessment estimates at absolute values, because the conclusion is that if we are overestimating the catchability for the acoustic survey, what we are doing is underestimating the stock biomass, and then from the precautionary side, we will be safe because we wouldn't put in risk the population, because actually we are above a biomass, about what we think. Okay, so what we think about the biomass is below the real one, so we will be in the safe side. So it's a different reason if we think that maybe there are more catches in there that we should have. But I will show the results in comparison to the 1/2 rule. So these are the results of the simulations. Basically, these are the 3 time periods: short, medium, and long. A range of harvest rates for the constant harvest rate rule and the 1/2 rule. So in the y-axis, the risk of being below billing, and in the x-axis, the catch in tons. So in the short term, we can see already that the 1/2 rule is not precautionary. It's not so much about the 5%, but it's not precautionary, while there is a range of harvest rates that are more or less here, that are precautionary and have higher catches than the 1/2 rule. In the mid and the long term, the 1/2 rule is precautionary, but it has much lower catches than the other constant harvest rate rules with a wide range of harvest rates. We identify already the 0.5 as a reference, as a harvest rate level that is precautionary and is producing higher catches than the 1/2 rule. And that is basically the conclusion, that harvest rate is the maximum precautionary, could be proposed as a HR-MSY proxy for this type of constant harvest rate rule, which is more precautionary and is producing higher catches than the 1/2 rule. We also included the biomass safeguard. I didn't have time to show the comparison between including one thing or the other, but at the end, it didn't make much of an effect. I think because it is a quite low value, and then basically the recruitment was pretty much random, so it didn't. So that was the conclusion, and this is the harvest control rule that was approved June, actually, and it is the one in place now, that the one is being used for the advice this year. The thing is that that issue of the catchability can be a discussion, of course, but in any case, we show that even if we are underestimating the biomass, which will be maybe a lower catch that we could, we are precautionary. Maybe we are providing advice with lower catch that we could, but in any case, it is providing a higher catch than what we will have with the 1/2 rule. This is going to be reviewed very soon because there is a benchmark for the assessment model, and again there will be. So this is just for this year, let's say, and preparing the framework for future work with MSC and so on. So, yeah, nothing else. Ter.
Preguntas, questions, comments, suggestions.
Gracias, Alfonso. Es una curiosidad. Entiendo que el problema de la capturabilidad es el que ha hecho que pase a la categoría 3, porque el gadget es un modelo analítico, sería categoría 1. Y mi pregunta es, ¿habéis hecho alguna comparación con la regla de 1/2, de utilizando, en vez de la, no sé qué utilizáis, la biomasa desovante de gadget, o no sé qué salida de gadget utilizáis para la tendencia, si habéis hecho con los índices de la campaña, como se hace con las estimas de la campaña, no con las estimas de un modelo?
Pues la verdad que no te puedo decir, yo llevo relativamente poco tiempo, pero no sé, me extrañaría. O sea, si ya este modelo está aprobado desde 2018, si en ese benchmark no se propuso esta otra opción como una opción siquiera secundaria, no lo sé. Creo que no. Hasta donde yo sé, no. Siempre se ha usado el modelo gadget desde 2018.
Simplemente una observación. En el componente oeste ese es el enfoque que se estaba aplicando previamente, ¿vale? Pero Laura Weiss precisamente ahora va a presentar su presentación y os va a explicar cuál es el nuevo escenario. Sí.
No, te lo pregunto después.
Muchas gracias, Alfonso. Yo más que una pregunta, simplemente quería felicitarte porque realmente este es un trabajo que al final se ha traducido en algo en la gestión que realmente ha tenido una trascendencia, ha sido una cantidad de trabajo que al final se aplica ahora en la vida real, ¿no? Y que eso a mí me parece que es un gran logro.
Muy bien, gracias, Margarita. Sí, al menos para este año ya ha habido un cambio ahí, que es un buen primer paso, pero yo creo que será sobre todo útil por todo lo que va a venir después, ¿no? En revisión de métodos de evaluación y bueno, ya hay un marco para evaluar y seguir progresando y sobre todo en cuestiones que ya se está hablando esta mañana, cuestiones socioeconómicas, incluso es un modelo de pesquerías mixtas, que bueno, creo que es una herramienta por la que se puede continuar progresando con trabajo futuro.
Bueno, ese es el tema. Sí. Yo los últimos datos que tuve hace 4 o 5 años, casi el 20% de las jornadas de pesca es sardina y boquerón, conjuntamente. Claro, ¿hasta qué punto se puede evaluar separadamente los dos recursos? Porque esos días que son mixtos, no se sabe si el pescador ha capturado boquerón porque ha salido, iba dirigido a la sardina y viceversa. Entonces hay una incertidumbre bastante fuerte. Yo no sé hasta qué punto los estudios que están haciéndose para diferenciar los stocks, si boquerón es Golfo de Cádiz, independiente del resto de 9A, y la sardina. Porque quizás fuera más interesante gestionar conjuntamente desde el Golfo de Cádiz ambas pesquerías, dado que son los mismos barcos, que no solamente ahora están actuando sobre estas dos especies, sino también quieren incorporarse masivamente a la captura de estos ninos. Y entonces vamos a encontrar con que es una pesquería muy importante y completamente diferente a lo que ocurre en Galicia. La aberración de lo que en este momento la cuota no capturada de los barcos cerqueros del Golfo de Cádiz se distribuye entre la flota gallega, hombre, es que no estás capturando la misma sardina, es otra, en fin.
Bueno, sí, la verdad que hay muchas cuestiones ahí en el comentario. Sí, seguro, pero bueno, paso a paso, es cierto, hay muchas complejidades, tanto en el stock, en la flota, quiero decir, a nivel biológico, pesquero, metodologías de evaluación que deben ir progresando y ver hasta qué punto, como hablábamos el otro día, creo que quedó bastante claro en la cuestión de la estructuración espacial, la complejidad que tenemos en cuanto a disponibilidad de datos, posibilidades de modelar dentro de un marco de gestión, la complejidad socioeconómica. Todo eso serán cuestiones en las que ir evolucionando y Margarita está ahora mismo liderando en este equipo y hay proyectos por delante que seguro que se pueden hacer cosas. Es complejo, muy complejo, pero